Yeah, that way, in those that wanted to join and it just doesn't work out today, that they can join us. So on a video replay, so to speak. And if there's any additional comments, we can just take things from there. So just as a reminder, down below at the bottom of the screen, there's the chat bar. So if you have questions or if you want to make a comment on something that I'm saying, that also shows up in the recording. So feel free to use that. And yeah, I think it's also helpful that I reminded people, because I don't think I did a good job of that early on, that whenever you join one of these Zoom chat sessions, if it doesn't work for you to participate verbally and you just want to stay on mute, or you just don't want your background or your picture shown, you can always turn off the video. So I don't want that to prohibit anyone from joining in the future. So I'll be sure to remind people of that too. And then this particular, because it's centered around the intuitive eating practices that we're all learning, the 10 principles, it's really just for current participants because you have access to resources and so forth that people that are in past challenges that have joined the Facebook group don't have access to. And so that's why I don't post it as an event in the Facebook group. But for regular Mojo Chat sessions, if there's a random person or two that used to be on the team that just wants to join in, that's fine. So with that, I was just going to kind of launch in. I had some initial thoughts that I wanted to share with you guys, and then we'll open it up for questions and then get into, how we practice principle number 2, which is honor your hunger. Okay, maybe just by a quick show of hands, who's read the principle number 2 materials? I know there's just a few of us on the call. Okay, so Sherry, you have, and like I said, Deb, no problem if you haven't gotten to it, or anyone really. I'm going to go through the highlights today, and then it's an opportunity to just either say how you've put this into practice or how you might envision doing that. Hi, Belinda. I'm glad you're with us. We're just getting going. So as you know, there's the article that I sent out. It was 2 pages on Honor Your Hunger. It's really a summary from the Intuitive Eating book. And then I also parked in there some practical worksheets that come out of the workbook itself. Because the whole point, no matter what we talk about when it comes to honoring your hunger, it really always comes back to bringing yourself to present moment focus and attunement with your body. It maybe sounds obvious to honor your hunger, but a lot of people don't take it that way. Some people can see it as, okay, if I honor my hunger, I can just eat anything and there's no consequences, and what path is that going to lead me down to? And that's not really what honoring your hunger is about. It's really about relearning your innate biology and the hunger cues and the body sensations and the feedback that tell you, not just are you hungry, but what's your hunger level and what kinds of foods in that moment are going to best quench you, so to speak, using thirst as an example. And so bringing back that present moment focus, which for most of us, other than, the first few years of life, we've kind of lost that ability, that we are just living externally based on either conditioning around what time it is to eat, other people are eating, so okay, I'll eat, all these external reasons for when we eat and what we eat versus attuning to your own body sensations. And so that's what really honoring your hunger is about. And as it said in the article, some people can take this a little bit further, and it becomes kind of a diet mantra of thou shalt not eat unless hungry. So, once you start to practice this stuff and you feel the hunger and the sensations and you identify it and you're, really aligned with that, it isn't meant to then become only eat when you're hungry. There are lots of reasons we eat that have nothing to do with our primal hunger, needing nourishment. It's things like, taste. It just sounds good. I'm on vacation and this is kind of the area's specialty. That sounds really tasty. I'm going to eat. Or practical hunger. You know, you have a special event where maybe you don't normally eat after 8 p.m. at night, for instance, because you go to bed shortly after and you don't want to go on a full stomach. But you're at a social event, it's a celebration, and dinner's going to be served at 8:30, or a dessert is, or something. So that's another kind of practical reason. And then just emotional hunger. Once we begin to understand our biological cues and sensations and attunement with our body, we can then distinguish between, is my desire to eat something an emotional based eating versus a primal hunger within me. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with eating for emotional reasons. I mean, when you have that level of attunement, you know, emotional eating gets this bad rap, like it's, you know, something to avoid at all costs, that it's something bad and detrimental. But there really are times where you're going through something and that food is comforting, it's soothing, it helps you move through and actually digest life experiences. But you're doing it with, again, very present, conscious awareness. And the reason for this heightened level of attunement is so that you don't have like the backlash, the guilt, the beating yourself up, the questioning yourself and how you can't trust yourself with food because, oh, I just, you know, ate the whole sleeve of cookies, or, you know, whatever it is. So that's something to keep in mind. And so one of the things that I highlighted in the article that I think can really help people understand the perspective of what deprivation and restriction around food, particularly in this day and age when there's so much nutritional advice out there that most everything you read, you can find something conflicting, or you've been on a path of dieting for years and one thing said to do this and the other said to do that. And then you created your own set of food rules. Your parents gave you a set of food rules and so forth. It's hard to really trust, you know, what is the right path for you based on what you're trying to do long term with your whole body health, you know, and also your mental health, your spiritual health. And so the study that was highlighted in the article was really around that Minnesota starvation diet. And you might not be familiar with it. There was a link in the article to go back and, you know, really read through a summary, but it wasn't the label of the study makes it sound like these 36 men who were initially set, you know, they were psychologically and emotionally stable. They were fit, really fit men during the end of, you know, kind of World War II. It was around 1944. They weren't starved per se, in the sense that they weren't given any food. They were just taken from about 3,600 calories a day to 1,600 calories per day. You know, but again, these are men, and they typically have a higher metabolic burn. That's why, you know, men can typically have a higher quantity of caloric intake to manage their bodies. But these individuals, if you think about it, Jenny Craig, if any of you have ever done that diet or familiar with it, their caloric intake or their target of their foods, prepackaged foods, which I don't endorse Jenny Craig at all, is about 1,200 calories. So, you know, and that's clearly for the intention of weight loss. Well, the study was really around when you withhold food, you know, that deprivation, that restriction of good foods, bad foods, and how much, the quantity, what does that emotionally and psychologically do to a person? Not just during the reduction of food, but actually beyond that. Because when we get really down to this principle, honor your hunger, the frequency and the duration that you have spent so far in your life practicing, you know, rigid food rules or any forms of unnatural dieting, suppression of appetite, suppression of, you know, eating foods that you enjoy and so forth, that has a really long-standing and far-reaching impacts on, your beliefs and values about yourself and about food itself. And so the study showed that these men, during the 6 months that they were reduced to 1,600 calories, that they went through some pretty amazing psychological and emotional things. They started to obsess about food. One guy read a cookbook every night. Other individual went and stole food and was like on this euphoric high during the time period. And others would go to the length of licking their plate or really slowing down eating to savor the experience for longer because they knew that their food was being rationed. So doing things like holding the food in their mouth. But there became this obsession around food. And even after the experiment and the refeeding, they called it, they tended to overeat, because that almost primal place in our bodies that, like, I don't know where the next meal is going to come from. And that's really where we're at when we don't honor our hunger and we live by these prescriptive rules that are external from us. Is we're not listening to our body to tell us when it's time to eat, what foods to eat, how much to eat, to a level of fullness. And it becomes so external to our body, we just lose the ability to tune in. But we had it. We had it when we were born. It's built into everybody's DNA. We can all regain the skill. But I will tell you that sometimes when people really want to, change their inner voice and that inner critic, and they want to eat in a more natural, healthy, intuitive eating way, and then they learn this principle, they're like, oh, that's so hard. That's so tedious. It takes so long. It's so slow. Because what you're doing is you're relearning a skill that in our go busy lives, even though we're dealing with coronavirus, we still have external stressors. It's a matter of pausing. It's becoming willing to slow down and pause, willing to trust the process, given you've had years and decades of eating in a certain way and using external cues to tell you when you're hungry and what to eat, and a rigid set of rules for a lot of us. And then being willing to go through the discomfort that comes with relearning how to tune into your body and using those cues. There's also becoming willing to stay curious, dropping into that place of a curious mindset without the judgment attached to it, because you're being curious about what you're hearing from your body and what it's telling you, and then what stories you say that, override your belief system around, your food, your weight, your body. And then it's really becoming willing to actually listen and then use that as information sorry, I just saw an alert. Use that information to then make an informed choice, a conscious, present, informed choice that will honor not only your hunger, but your body and what you're trying to do long term. So, and these things, some people, who have weight loss as a goal, sometimes think, well, if I honor my hunger and I follow these principles, will I still get weight loss? Well, it's not a diet, but yes, if you learn these 10 principles, you practice these 10 principles, it is my 100% belief, and I'm living testament to it too, that you will reach a weight that you are healthy, happy, vibrant, and you no longer obsess about food. It's not a problem in your life. And at any point you want to elevate the quality, the experience, and deepen the principles. If there's weight to lose, if your body is ready to release weight, it will naturally do that. It becomes the natural byproduct of these principles. So just wanted to put that out there for anybody who has weight loss as one of their goals, and they think that these principles in intuitive eating don't align, because they absolutely do. Remember, this is returning us to our factory settings with regard to our relationship with food. So we are not meant to carry additional pounds on our body that prevent us from living our best life. And we're all also not meant to look exactly like one another. So different shapes and sizes are part of the process. But let me just read, Sherry, you said when you say slow down, do you mean slow to lose the weight? And are you talking about slowing down while you're actually eating, or?
No, you said something about this being a very slow process.
Oh, that part. Yes. So for most people, they have detached from sensing what actual hunger cues are and suppressing their appetite unnaturally for so long. The unlearning can take a long time. It can be a slow process to relearn to pause, listen for the inner wisdom that are the body feedbacks you're getting, to sense what is your hunger level. Is it truly hunger for food, or is it hunger for something else? And so imagine each time you go to eat during the day that you, for 5 minutes before you actually indulge, you pause and you practice these body attunement awareness practices. It's typically, for most people, it's not an overnight process. So that's what I mean it being a slow process, is it could take months to years, and there's no actual final destination, because you can always deepen your learning at any point. Or when your life shifts, that's a great time that you might feel like you take a step back because now you're in a busier season in your life. Or maybe, for somebody who just had a baby, or they just got married, or they just moved overseas, or something like that, it takes another learning process. But it's a skill you take with you everywhere, versus that perpetual seek for the one right way to eat and the one right diet, and the very rigid list of, this is good foods for me, these are bad foods for me. And then that always leads to character failing, or attaching it morally somehow, because you have this rigid set of rules of what you can eat and what you can't eat, versus just listening to your body to let it guide you.
So I hear you saying that it's easy in some ways and harder in other ways.
Yeah. So for a lot of people, it's hard to slow down. I mean, with the actual process, in the worksheets that are in the Dropbox folder, one of the very first exercises was perceiving your own heart rate. We've all been taught how to do that, listen for your heart rate on your neck, or, on your hand, or something like that. And so the exercise is, find your heart rate, those ways, but then try it again and just sit still with your eyes open or closed, and just pause, hands on your lap, and just pause. Can you sense your heart rate? And this is one of the, meditation is also great for building body attunement, and being curious in that, what am I feeling, and what label am I giving it, and what am I telling myself about the experience? Because that gets to the heart of your beliefs and the stories you tell yourself. And a lot of those aren't supportive in the direction you're trying to go. But that's one exercise, just to give an example of, well, what does body attunement even mean? And then it goes on to ask you, to getting to know your body's physical sensations. So you're listening for that body feedback. So this is the practical how-to of creating a foundation around honoring your hunger. Because without that inner wisdom, that knowledge of, this is my body's way of telling me I'm hungry for food, versus I'm hungry for intimacy, I'm hungry for connection, I'm hungry for an energy boost, I'm hungry for sleep, I'm hungry for thirst. It leads you down all those paths. So then it talks about in here, the physical sensations. And with it, this is a really, because that we need something practical and tangible to walk away from, once we read all the theoretical stuff around it. Okay, now how do I apply this? How do I put this into practice? And so this next worksheet was getting to know your body, physical sensations from biological cues and body states. And so the body cues are things like thirsty, need to urinate, hungry, full. And then where do you feel it in the body? In your neck, in your arms, in your shoulders, in your chest, in your stomach, in your bladder. I mean, it almost seems so elementary that we're having to give this much focus and this much attention to relearning this attunement to our body. But I don't know about any of you that are on today's call, but the way we've been living, we're all in our head and using external resources and feedback to tell us and guide us. So it has to get down to this kind of elementary 101 level of returning us back to, well, when we were younger, and all we have to do is pay attention to how, our little ones and our toddlers, how they eat. They're fully present. They attune to their body. They sense when they're full, when they've had enough. They eat based on taste. Even if something doesn't taste good to them, they don't just, well, I already fixed it, I'm just going to eat it anyway, which never leads to satisfaction. And then your cravings are going to be ongoing. Even though you're full, you're going to want to still eat. But like I said, if we just watch, our little ones, they are already exhibiting what an intuitive eater does until they get conditioned out of it, which is what happened to all of us. So I would say that it is a lifelong process, and that can sound really daunting and not very tasteful, because we want instant gratification and we want to be able to fix ourselves like overnight. So that's why I say I'm always honest with people that it's some of the most difficult work. I mean, the practices themselves are simple, but not easy. So it becomes the more difficult work of attuning to your inner world and trusting that that is your best guidance versus, that shiny object of, well, maybe this will work. Well, maybe this is the right way to eat. Well, I saw those before and after pictures online and she did it or he did it, so that must work. Let me try that. It's not getting hooked into that. It's always coming back to, my body has all the answers. We literally all have the answers within if we're willing to slow down and listen and then respond based on that feedback. So it's tedious, it's every day, and seeing everything, like we said in the first lesson or the introduction to intuitive eating, there is no failure in intuitive eating. There are only lessons. So, which is far different than any sort of diet mentality or rigid food rules that any of us carry with, because there's clear evidence in that environment of pass fail. It's very easy to externally measure yourself on a diet or with rigid food rules. Am I doing good or am I doing bad? But when it comes to intuitive eating, it's an evolving process, and there is no failure. It's just, this is an opportunity to learn from, grow from, deepen my practice, and move forward with. So it's very freeing and liberating, in my opinion. I remember back in my dieting days that I would wake up every day and wonder, is today going to be a good food day or a bad food day? And my mind was obsessed with basically grading myself throughout the day if I was being a good person or a bad person based on my food choices. And it's just exhaustive. I mean, just what a soul crusher. And it prevented me from living a truly liberated life where food was what it was meant for. Yes, to nourish our body, but also pleasure. And then we move on with life. It's not this overarching obsession all day long. So I would strongly recommend that anyone, download those worksheets, and it does come with the instructions on how to put them into practice, and begin there, because that's really the basic starting place for honoring your hunger, is recognizing that your body has all the answers if you'll slow down and be willing to listen to the feedback. And then there's a really good two-part worksheet that's in there as well. And it's about doing kind of an assessment of the things that help you to attune to your body versus the things that are detractors or things that get you off track. And so it gets into the, what they call positive behaviors in the realms of physical, emotional, and psychological, and relationships. And those are the things that support you being in tune with your body, which you'll love this from the standpoint of all of the things that we're practicing in the Whole Life Challenge, those foundational habits around sleep, hydration, moving our body, stretching, reflecting, well-being. They all support, obviously, our food choices. But there's a heavy emphasis on when we're deeply committed to having these self-care practices as a priority in our life, our listening skills become that much better and that much more automatic, because we're in a physical and mental space to be willing to pause, slow down, and listen. We all know what it's like to be sleep deprived or be going through a very difficult emotional situation, being divorced or having to move across country someplace you don't want to go, or like in my case, going through the grief of losing their mother. All of these things will take us out of our body and usually more into our head. So that's when it's even more critical to rely on these foundational health habits so that your attunement to honoring your hunger stays in that place that allows you to make good present moment decisions with your food choices versus going out, the numbing techniques that we use. And that was in the article as well that I put out is, how do you, what are some of the hunger suppression things that we tend to do? Because I know in the first, Zoom session with folks on principle number 1 about rejecting diet mentality, there was this, well, I'm not really a dieter. I've not really had this long history of dieting. So how does this really apply to me? But remember, there's lots of other labels. So you don't need to be a dieter to maybe have some unwanted food behaviors or beliefs about food and your body. It could be things like just being very restrictive and rigid, and you unnaturally suppress your hunger or your appetite for whatever reason, whatever you feel that that's going to benefit you. And so some of the ways that we suppress that hunger unnaturally are things like, numbing ourselves. And the example was a lot of people use diet soda, coffee, these kinds of quick tricks to trick our stomach into not having that rumbling feeling. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna, and diet soda is one of those that it's got a wicked rebound because it has those artificial sugars in there that actually tell our body that we got food and we got sugar, but we really didn't. So the body keeps seeking it. So people who drink diet soda tend to have much more distinct and stronger cravings than those that don't. So that's one way. Obviously, dieting, and a lot of us have been trained to believe that if we're on a diet, the whole key to success is willpower. But when you're unnaturally suppressing your appetite and your hunger, your biology will always win. You can suppress it, and just think of that first week of a diet when you're so mentally in the zone and you're euphoric and you get those initial sorts of good feelings, but it quickly dissipates because your biology is catching up and you can't overcome that what we call willpower, because it's going to affect things like your mood, your energy level, your patience, and so forth. And you'll eventually succumb to eating the things that weren't on your diet. And the last one, and a lot of us fall prey to this, is just living a chaotic, busy life. That's another way to just suppress your hunger. And, you know, you've heard of people who go through a really intense situation and they actually lost weight and they're like, well, it wasn't the best way to lose it, but I'll take it, you know, but it never lasts because life calms down and you go back. So that's something else to keep in mind, is just what are the ways that you're unnaturally suppressing your appetite now, becoming familiar with those patterns, so that then when you're doing these body attunement practices, you can kind of see where they pop up on you. Okay, that it's an unnatural suppression. So this are the attunement, the self-care assessment. And then on the back side of that worksheet were the attunement disruptors. So, you know, things like, I'll just read a few here in case you don't have it in front of you. Like on the physical side, that you often skip meals when you're pressed for time. I watch more than 2 hours of TV a day. You know, that could be also surfing on your phone. I smoke. I overeat or undereat when I'm stressed. You know, it's that deregulation that your body becomes confused of, am I going to get consistent, nourishing food, or is this just kind of a haphazard hit or miss sort of thing that can disrupt your cravings, your hunger level, and so forth. You know, sleep deprivation. I know I harp on this all the time, but sleep deprivation, not getting enough consistent quality sleep, that is the number one killer to being attuned to your body, because you just don't have the wherewithal. That really, sleep is the fuel to your willpower. So without that critical fuel, you are just, I mean, we're kind of no different than just kind of, you know, animals, in the sense that we will do things from a primal basis. So the, you know, the knocking on, I'm hungry, feed me now, that kind of ravenous sort of place we can get into, that hangry as it's called, it will win out. So sleep is your most basic form of filling up your battery, so you have the wherewithal to then pause, slow down, listen for that feedback. Let's see, Deb, you said, I think I've seen that you also do intermittent fasting. How do you combine that with intuitive eating? That's a great question, because intermittent fasting has been around for hundreds of years, well, since the dawn of time. It actually stems its roots in religious practices and so forth. But I would say that anyone who is jumping into intermittent fasting and is doing it for the purpose of weight loss is doing it because it's a diet. And so they don't coexist with intuitive eating in that regard. So if you don't already have attunement skills and to honor your hunger, and reject diet mentality and the other 8 principles of intuitive eating, then intermittent fasting will work just the same as any other diet that you sign up for. You'll do it for a while, you'll see some results, you'll get tired of it because it wasn't what you intended to do as a lifestyle shift long term. And then if you did lose weight as a result of it, you will regain the weight and probably more, because you unnaturally suppressed your hunger and your appetite. So when I do intermittent fasting, and I've only been experimenting with it probably for like the last 6 to 8 months, in part because I have clients who are diabetic, and I follow Dr. Jason Fung, who's a nephrologist and has written the obesity code. And he has actually have thousands upon thousands of examples of reversing diabetes, that this doesn't have to be a chronic progressive disease. So it really just, wow, you know, my mom was a diabetic, and I just was like, my God, if we'd have had this information 20 years ago, that you could cure diabetes, you know, you reverse it with intermittent fasting and eating a low carb lifestyle. Wow. You know, so I kind of got on board with it, because I'm just like, well, I wonder what that would be like to intermittent fast along with my mind, body, nutrition, and intuitive eating skills. And so I do have a window. I have found some benefit from delaying my first meal to around 11 a.m. But there are days that my hunger is such that 11 a.m., I'm going to white knuckle it if I have to go that long. And I don't white knuckle it. I mean, I'll pause. I'll consider what's going on. A lot of time it's just restless energy that I'm trying to avoid a project or a task or a conversation that I don't want to have. And so it's not hunger. So it actually, for me, helps me tune into my body even more in those moments, because it causes me to face what I'm actually trying to avoid versus when I'm actually hungry. So does that help, Deb? Does that answer your question? Oh, I see your thumbs up. Okay. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend intermittent fasting to anyone who doesn't also have a foundation, or at least a interest in building intuitive eating skills, because it's a recipe for disaster long term, so to speak, if they're using it for diet reasons. So let me see, let me just check my notes here real quick. I think those are the majority of kind of the highlights I wanted to get to today. I wanted to be sure that I really addressed, well, how do you put this into practice? Because if you're like me, I love to learn and broaden my mind and my perspective, but I hate to walk away from those kind of learning environments without actionable, tangible, okay, now how do I put it into practice? So do you all feel, just give me, you know, kind of a thumbs up or a comment or something. Do you feel like you have something to begin the process of attunement? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Cause that, it really is so basic and so elementary, but it's the critical building blocks to the next set of principles. Thanks, Belinda. Thanks, Deb. And it's where we all begin. Do you guys have any other questions about intuitive eating just in general, or about principle number 1, reject diet mentality, or just some random thoughts around nutrition and what you're trying to do with food? No? All right. Well, I won't keep you then. That was really all I came prepared to talk about, focused on principle number 2. I can't thank you guys enough for joining me today. It's so nice to see you. And this was recorded, so I'm going to be putting it on my YouTube channel, and then I'll put it out there for everyone on the team to watch if they had wanted to be a part of it. So I think I'm going to also include in the next couple coaches post is just put that survey where what people's availability is for certain Zoom sessions. All of our schedules change, and you know, it's different for everybody, but I try to pick a time that seems to meet up with more teammates that are interested. So watch out for that too. I'll put that out there in one of the coaches posts. And if you would just want to vote, if you want to continue to join some of the Zoom sessions, just let me know when your availability is, and then I'll work my schedule around those so that, you know, we have as many people on the team that can join as possible. And with that, I hope you guys have a wonderful Sunday.
Thank you, you too.
Thanks. Thanks, Sangwa. Thanks for joining.
Yep. Bye.
Bye, guys.